Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special meeting of Brant County Council, May the 30th, 2023. We have the attendance has been taken. We're all here. Um, in front of you, you'll see addendum number 2. If I can have a mover to accept the addendum to be part of the package, Lucas and Councillor Coleman. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interests? Councillor Garneau?
Mr. Mayor, I think we've done well if I've only identified just one. It's site-specific number 3395 Old Onondaga Road East. The landowner is a client of ours.
Okay, thank you. Any other pecuniary interests? Seeing none, which takes us to number 5 very quickly. I'm going to call Jen up, and she's going to explain a few things and sort of lay out the lay of the land for this evening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Here we are again tonight, and thank you very much for your time. We'll just have a couple of housekeeping matters before we start, and a lot of questions that came up through emails, and also you asked me yesterday as well. So just to clarify a few things before we move on. But the biggest news today, ironically, our timing of this meeting is honestly very auspicious almost, and very interesting because today the province delayed the provincial planning statement till August 4th. That came in today. They're getting, I'm sure you've seen the articles in the news today, they're getting unbelievable pushback. We actually got copied through the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, the Beef Farmers of Ontario letter from Minister Clark. And they're backpedaling now on the lot severances. But also, to this day, we still don't have the natural heritage system policy. So it's been very difficult for us to navigate that. So at least that's a good thing, though. They've extended the deadline to August 4th, and I think they realize, too, they have a bit of work to do. So there's that. As we sat here last night, just with Bill 97 came up. Bill 97 last evening, yesterday afternoon, as we were sitting here, because they post in the legislature around 5 p.m. every day, the issues of the day. It went into third reading already. But just to clarify that the provincial planning statement that's out and Bill 97 are mutually exclusive. The PPS is actually tied to Bill 23. So if you remember in December, we came with a report with all those policy changes. That's actually the Bill 23 stuff. This is just one of their mechanisms. And we're still waiting for a bunch of items from Bill 23, like the attainable housing definition. There's also some regulations for parkland that they didn't do, some DC charge items they still haven't come up with. So there's still a lot of implementation items. So just to clarify that. So a couple other things with site specifics came up. A lot of the delegations. I had some questions about, the people who had the delegations, and we can answer questions for you tonight. Staff are here for anything you like tonight, anything help you out, and any motions. But just for some specifics, like related to settlement area boundary expansions, we said the question, like, is this their only chance to do it? Is coming tonight their only opportunity? And the answer is no, it's not. In fact, usually with the delegations, we've worked with them. As you see, there's some modified proposals that have come in with resubmissions with actually robust planning justifications that we had a bit of a deadline for them for us to review. So we could at least, go through them. Some of them were walk-ons, as we call it, but it's not their last kick at the can, as we say. There's a process in place to allow settlement area boundary expansions anyway, especially in the rural area. You're allowed to do that actually today. Anyone can do it, especially if it's related to an employment use with an existing business. That's a number one criteria. Also, you can do a minor rounding out to a settlement area for residential as well. So that process is in place now. And also, if with delegations and things, if no action's taken, they can do another opportunity, just walk away and say thank you very much, or they do a planning act. But they also can afterwards, anyone, when our notice of adoption goes out, we advertise, and anyone can go straight to the province as well with a submission. Usually, what happens is the province does come back to us for information. That's going to happen throughout this process, but just to let you know that there are 3 options for people still available to them. So just to clarify some of that. And we're here to answer any questions you have on any of the delegations or information. I'm happy to do that and any questions that we have on each of them. So one of the other things we got asked last night, just in terms of some of the growth forecasting questions that were asked, especially for the new members of council. I talked just really briefly because I tried to keep it short last night, and this is going to be short. Just to walk through, especially for the new councillors, just in terms of some of the stuff that happened through 2019 into 2020. So May of 2019, I don't know, that was like one of my first reports to council. There was a new growth plan that the province issued, and there was a lot of changes to it. And then I remember in October of 2019, I went downtown Toronto with the growth secretariat, and it was all about the land needs assessment. They were revising the actual methodology, and the outer ring was always a big problem for the actual growth secretariat because they actually didn't really know what to do with us. We're not an urban municipality. We were agricultural lands dotted with settlements, and it's very hard for them to define us. And you've known that throughout this process the whole time. It's very difficult to discern between the urban and rural system. And then in sort of into 2020, in February, it was right before lockdown, went back downtown Toronto, and the province had said, we're going to be revising your growth forecasts. And I'm like, great. And so they did. And in August of 2020, that's when this Schedule 3 forecast came out. So with the new provincial planning statement, they're getting rid of all of that. They're going back to everyone outside of, the Golden Horseshoe, just as their own forecasts. So we still have to do that the next round. It's just that they're not going to be prescriptively handing us something, which, I'm in essence is probably a better thing because there's always this controversy about the 59,000. So I guess one of the things I just wanted to clarify, especially for New York councillors and some of the questions, is the 59,000 is this forecast that may likely occur over the time. And if you remember, I remember Pam and I were sitting in Burford alone right before going into code red of COVID in December 2020 and presented on the actual Schedule 3 forecast, the reference scenario or the high scenario. What were we going to be? And council directed us to use the 59,000 during that report. And there's justification for that. So that's why there was a bit of, the addendum with the MCR. And as you know, nothing's linear. I mean, you know that if you take any statistics, it looks linear, but there's actually all these ebbs and flows like an ER chart in it, and that's what happens over time. And what the province actually does is they say, County of Brant, you've actually been tracking really low till 2016, but we have news for you. We're going to give you this forecast, and you have to figure out where you're going to put the residents and where you're going to put jobs. And it's not mutually exclusive. And the problem is our pendulum is a bit tipped right now because we're not creating enough jobs and we don't have enough employment land. So we have to sort of balance the scale back up. And the province says then, how are you going to accommodate those residents and jobs? Do you need more land in your urban boundary or do you need to expand? And that's the fundamental exercise that we were given by the province. And then all the details and the math is the 500 pages of the comprehensive review. And we are definitely tracking on a higher forecast, but it's a most likely scenario. But our job was actually to find the where and the how. And that was one of the things we had to do. And the good news for the community area residential lands is we didn't have to expand the boundaries. In fact, we have enough land in our boundaries beyond 2015 to accommodate that kind of growth forecast and even more. And that's the message we have to send to the province. And for them to justify expanding our boundary at this point to accommodate more residential growth, we feel cannot be justified at this point. Whereas on the other hand, with employment, that's a whole different case because now we don't have enough job creation and we don't have enough employment land to make the 26,000 jobs for the forecast because we're tracking a bit low. So I just wanted to clarify some of that, especially for the New York councillors who went around in 2019 and 2020 about what happened during that time. So, and I think that is some of the matters of clarification. We made notes on all the delegations last night. If there's any questions, especially related to their submissions, we had heard from pretty much everyone before they came on. And staff are all here ready and waiting for any questions you may have. So I'll turn it back to Mayor Bailey.
Thank you, Jen. And before we start, I'd like to thank staff again for everything they've done to get us to this point. We're hoping that it'll be settled soon for you so that we can move on and do something else. Maybe a little bit more interesting. Not that this isn't interesting, but I'm sure there's things out there that are more interesting. With that being said, I am here to facilitate now a debate and discussion on any additions or amendments or motions you have to be brought against the official plan the way it stands. And please, when you're making reference to anything, please state the page so that we can all follow through as to what you're either opposing or supporting when you bring it up. Councillor, how is your first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is more of a general question to staff. I'll direct it to Jen and maybe to Jyoti. Something that popped into my mind as we were receiving communications and delegations, and I believe that it's inappropriate for us to deliberate anything that's at the OLT. And I'm just wondering if staff could provide a little context to that, and I don't know whether a motion is necessary, and I'd be interested in seeing the appetite of the rest of council on this, but I'm concerned that it to me it just doesn't make sense. If something's at the OLT, it doesn't make sense for us to be banging it around, so to speak.
Yeah, volleying it back and forth.
Yeah.
Who wants to speak to that?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Bailey, to Councillor Howe's great question, and I'll ask Jyoti to follow up after my very short comments. But I would tend to agree with you, Councillor Howe's. We're talking tonight about general policies of the official plan. We're not talking about specific development proposals that are before County Council or the OLT, and I'm going to let Jyoti follow up.
Thank you.
Good evening, councillors and your worship. So through you, your worship, to Councillor Howe's, I think your spidey sense is bang on, Councillor Howe's. What Ms. Dusling has indicated is that tonight you're dealing with the entire official plan, the new official plan, and not any specific application. It's the specific applications that are before the OLT. And so I concur with the sentiment that I would discourage getting into the weeds associated with any specific application that's currently before the OLT.
Thank you. With that being said, I'm looking for a motion. Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that for the purposes of this meeting, we not discuss any matters that are at the OLT.
Seeking a seconder in Councillor Oakley. Any discussion before we call the vote? Concerns? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor House. Who's next? Councillor Miller.
Just, I want to ask a question of a general nature. On
Yes.
This. It wasn't that long ago that we, as the municipality, had to go to the province every time we wanted to change our OP, even if it was just a minor rounding out or whatever. Is there anything that we can do going forward for an official plan amendment that needs to go to the province? I'm referring specifically to a secondary plan. Secondary plans are one of the tools in our toolbox to manage growth, but they can be pretty substantial and they form part of the official plan. So is there anything that we do that we could mess with the official plan? And like I said, I'm thinking mainly of secondary plans that we would need approval from the province.
Brandon.
Through the mayor, to Councillor Miller. So that's a great question. Generally speaking, secondary planning, we can do that in-house. We do have delegated authority from the province for the majority of our official plan amendments. As we're part of the growth plan area, there are two situations where we do not have delegated authority. So when it's related to removing land from the prime agricultural area or removing natural heritage from the natural heritage system of the growth plan, those decisions go directly to the province. So council can endorse their stance on those, but they need the minister's approval specifically.
Okay, thank you very much. And because I know in the future we're going to be seeing secondary plans, so thank you.
Next, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a general comment, and there's no particular page that I would refer to, but it really relates to my conversation or my comments last night, that I believe the plan underestimates the growth that we're going to experience. It's pretty evident in Paris that the estimates of only a couple of years ago in the first MTR have been superseded by something like 50%. And it doesn't take much to just walk around the south of Paris and shortly the north of Paris and shortly in St. George to see that growth is going really fast. And the removal of the excess lands policy, I think, just exacerbates that. If we add in Sifton and Cordon and TCA, we're talking about another 6,500 people in Paris, which has a dramatic effect on all of the things we do in terms of infrastructure planning, in terms of support for recreation, for schools. It really does. We need to have a good number that underpins exactly what we're doing. If I go to Burford, I think what we have in the official plan, certainly I spent a lot of time reading the draft, and then when I looked at the final, I saw words that had gone. There were things that the whole issue about Burford had softened down from it being part of the urban system and therefore will be fully serviced. And there was a date of 2031 there, and there was a date of 2036 there. There are lots of people just waiting for the moment to go and build in Burford. People are buying up land. So add all that together. 59,000 is not the number I believe we should be planning for. And I would like to make a motion that we actually plan internally for a number which is actually the most likely outcome and not the minimum outcome. And just last night, Jamie from Watson's said it again. 59,000 is a good number, but he also said it's the minimum number, and he also talked about 10 things that would make it unlikely to happen. So I would like to see that our staff, and it doesn't have to happen before this official plan is done, but I think for all the internal work we do, we should use a realistic number. We should plan for the worst, hope for the best. If we plan for 59,000, we're going to fall short, and we will not be remembered. The legend of this council will be, they didn't get it right. They couldn't see what was coming when it was right in front of their eyes. So I'm looking for a seconder that would support the motion to do our internal planning on a most likely number.
Councillor Bell, and you have a seconder in Councillor Pierce. Any other discussion? Councillor Howes and then Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. So I respect the intent behind this, and I appreciated the specific note about not trying to change the official plan, but trying to change our operational plans. It's almost like having two sets of books for a business, like the one, and I wonder, like I think back to the early days of starting this official plan. Jen clearly understood that one of our goals was to manage growth, and it would be very difficult to continue saying that we're managing growth if we put numbers in our official plan that are actually higher than what the province is targeting us to do. So if I can support this motion, if there's true emphasis on the fact that we're not changing the official plan, but we are changing how we look at ourselves operationally. I wouldn't want our communities to think that we are initiating a growth target that's higher than what the province is requiring it, because all along we've been saying manage growth. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Chambers and then Councillor Oakley.
Okay, I'll begin by saying I don't disagree that the growth will exceed what our projection is. However, to pass a resolution to exclude that, and that's not a good resolution. It's not a good thing to do. First of all, the official plan that David asked and said last, it's a snapshot in time. This official plan is not the plan that will take us to 2051. This plan will be reviewed when? in 5 years. So it's a living document, it changes, and as we update, we can have better forecasting based on trends that are happening rather than saying now that we're going to exceed 59,000. So it's not the thing to do with an official plan. The official plan is a guide as we move forward. So you can't peg, uh, you can anticipate, but you can't determine. So I understand that we may be underestimating the growth, but to say that it's going to be this or that or whatever, I don't think that's appropriate. Along with that, some of the things that are concerning with underestimating the growth projections are this. We do it backwards and we do it wrong, but everybody does it. We should marry our official plan with our strategic plan and our financial plan and all the infrastructure plans all together. We don't do that. Nobody does. It's hard. What we do is we do it linearly. We do the official plan. Next week, we're starting the strategic plan. We've had some infrastructure plans. We will have the financial plan at the end of the year. So you're doing one and then the other and the other and the other, and you should be doing them all the same. That's hard to do. And unfortunately, we do it linearly. In some ways, the official plan should follow the strategic plan and the financial plan. We've got it backwards because our strategic plan is what we want to do. Our financial plan is how we're going to pay for what we're going to do. Our official plan is how to generate the funds for to be able to do that. So we're reversed, in my opinion. Official plans are updated every 5 years. We've done it, I don't know, I've done it a dozen times. And hopefully the council can recognize that this isn't the be all and end all. It's one of many official plans over the years, and it will be superseded by the next official plan. What we tend to get bogged down in terms of what we do is with land designations and gimme requests. Like, this is what we should set that aside and deal with the policies that affect growth and manage growth. And we hardly even talked about that last night. It's all what people want. One of the things that came up at the planning meeting, or the council meeting, was we're being bogged down by OLT hearings. Some of the policies in our official plan can alleviate some of the appeals to the Ontario Municipal Board, or the OLT, whatever they call it. Where are those policies, and how does that impact us going forward? We're changing our strategy on applications. We're having complete applications done a different way, and our official plan needs to mirror that. So those are just some broad comments without getting into specifics. And I could talk all night about this, and we fortunately don't have all night, but I just want to kind of keep our eyes focused on what we're doing, and without getting into the weeds or the points where perhaps we shouldn't be. So, and that's not a criticism, that's just a
Thanks, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Oakley and then Councillor Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say that I agree with the comments that my colleague, Councillor Bell, said. I do wonder, though, kind of along the lines of what Councillor Chambers said, if this isn't more appropriate for our meeting tomorrow night on the strategic plan. Specifically at 5:30, we're discussing taking stock and identifying County of Brant's strategic itches. So I'm wondering if that conversation is more relevant there as opposed to here, since as we stated, it's not directly affecting the official plan. Perhaps that's a conversation to have in our strategic plan, since it's a strategic element.
I think you're probably right, Councillor Oakley. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think, well, I concur 100% with Councillor Bell. I think the numbers are on the low end. Having said that, I think Jamie Cook from Watson and I think our staff kind of feel the same way, because at the end of their presentation last night at the start, they said next steps, growth tracking and monitoring. Jamie at the end of his said we need a dynamic growth management tool. And I asked him specifically about it, if there were examples. He cited Brampton. These, I think, are the ways to go about it. You put implementing these so that we can see in real time as the years unfold exactly how our growth is proceeding. So I concur with Councillor Bell. I don't concur with the way he would this motion would deal with that. I'd rather leave it up to what planning staff is already alluding to, already aware of, and already working towards. Thank you.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I agree with the motion and seconded the motion. I think, as we've said, everybody has said around this table and in this room, I think we all can concur that the numbers will be higher. To pull on something Councillor Chambers said, anticipate, not determine. And Councillor Bell was quite clear in the sense that it's not going to change the final draft of the official plan that we have here. I think what the motion is trying to get at is the fact that we need to change our way of thinking. It's the fact of we need to, as Councillor Chambers says, we need to anticipate the numbers are going to be much higher than what the province is set right now, especially when you think about, you know, it's up in the air whether the excess lands are going to be in or going to be out. But if they do pull that, as I say, I can, you know, I don't think it's out of the realm that the province is going to come back and say, oh, you know what, we did say 59, now we mean 65, or now we mean 70. Again, it's not changing things as we go. And if you, yes, this plan will be updated in 5 years, but if we look at the growth in the last 5 years, and we can anticipate at least that much in the next 5 years, there is so much in the pipes right now, and we haven't even started on St. George. Once St. George is out and building, it's going to get us to that 59,000 way too quick. Had we not have tapped the brakes a few years ago, we would probably, my gut's telling me the province would have given us more than what they have. I think it's a safe bet. Everybody has said it. The numbers are going to be higher. And I agree with Councillor Bell in the sense we're not changing things. All we're changing is our way of thinking. We need to have the mindset that number is going to be much higher than that in everything we look at, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's our financial plan, our strategic plan, all of that. We can't go into any of those thinking that number of 59,000. And my understanding is that's kind of where the motion is going, to just change our way of thinking, not necessarily change what we do, but change how we think about the next 5 years and the 5 years after that. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Bell.
Sorry, if I just may respond, Mr. Mayor. It's, to me, it's clear that demand for housing, it's not set by us, it's not set by the provincial government, it's set by the developers recognising that people want to move out of the GTA and into a rather more rural, small town area. And they are building to suit, and they're building at a pace to suit. And they're not building what we want them to build, and I'll come back to that if I get a second chance at talking. But I think we should not believe for a second that we have any control over the demand. And the supply, as Jamie Cook showed yesterday, go to St. George, they already have draft approved 3 times the number of houses that are actually in our forecast. So are we going to not let that happen? I can't imagine for a second that we won't be allowed to not let that happen. And if it happens, we want to be ready for it. I mean, St. George has a great opportunity to plan for something that they can see coming. Paris, we're already in the middle of it, and it's much more difficult to deal with. But even in Paris, once the excess lands policy has gone, you know, the floodgates open, and the people that we've seen at this table who've come to plead their case when we said we'd like to not have you developed quite so soon, they're going to go for it. And we need to be ready in all respects. And I don't want to undo any of the work of this official plan. The policy bits, Councillor Chambers, I think are brilliant. I think they've done a fabulous job in that. So all the core of it is great, but we need, as a county, to understand what's coming. And when we do our long-term financial plan, we need to reflect that we're not providing for 59,000 in 2051. More likely we'll be seeing that in 10 years before that time. And there's a whole acceleration that we have to respond to. And we're around this table as councillors are going to get it in the neck if we don't see this coming and don't deal with it.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I think that we all agree that that's the truth, that it's going, we're going to be much larger than proposed. But I think when the province or anybody gives anyone a limit to work to, it's to keep people that don't work fast enough moving. We were moving fast enough, and we're going to continue to move fast enough because the County of Brant has proved itself to be a very saleable market. There's other pieces of Ontario that aren't able to move as quickly as we were and get as much done. So I never saw that as the number that we were setting ourselves up for. I've always seen it as just something they had to say it was a minimum, always a minimum to me. Because I mean, we have to say it out loud that we've seen what's happened, and as you said, St. George is growing, and Burford will grow, and all the different side roads to Burford and St. George will grow. I've always seen it as a minimum, and I don't know that we're not going to look clever if we've said it all. We all said it out loud. We know what we're talking about as far as what's coming. We probably could start counting houses now, and we could even be there. Who knows? Or very close to it. And it's not going to stop. And we have lots of land for it to grow much bigger. So I think you're right. Your motion's on the floor.
Yeah.
It has a seconder. There is some wording that Alicia can offer from policy planning if you want to hear it.
Be very nice, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I do have some wording here, a draft motion prepared by the policy planning team, that council directs staff to prepare an information report to planning committee and council to review the existing capital financing options concerning growth-related infrastructure implemented by various Ontario municipalities to address the growth management issue, and that the report be submitted before September to inform the next development charges background study and bylaw.
If I may, Mr. Bell, it's not entirely clear to me that reflects what I said. But if planning team can say yes, they're going to address what I've just said, I'm happy with the wording.
I'm sure they'll take our direction to acknowledge what you said, Councillor Chambers.
That sounds more like what I said than what Councillor Bell said.
That's good. That means we all agree. We should call the vote right now while everyone's smiling. It's on the floor. It's been seconded. Everyone's clear of the motion. All those in favor? Oppose? Let the book show that it was unanimous. Thank you. Who's next? Oh, okay. Councillor Bell, you can keep going. Let Councillor Chambers go next, and then we'll come back to you.
I was just going to say it's a great segue into looking at the policy to manage growth, and section 9.0 on page 411, tools to manage growth. That's what I think Councillor Bell is indicating, that if this growth is going to exceed what our expectations are, those policies to manage growth better be good policies. And maybe staff could respond to that in terms of how we're going to manage the growth. Are those policies in section 9 adequate if we exceed our growth potential? So maybe they can comment on that.
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers. Thanks for bringing that up, Councillor Chambers. And just a couple things too in terms of the population forecasting. So I didn't say this right at the beginning, but every year the Ministry of Finance every April for Ontario budget releases the MOF, as we call it, population projections. So that's what they inform to the budget every year, and that goes to the school boards, the hospitals, transportation, and that's what finances growth. And then every 5 years, as Councillor Chambers mentioned, every 5 years, technically, we have to do a growth forecasting report. And every year, actually, every municipality is supposed to do a tracker report to a council on growth management tracking. That's never been done here before. Because not to say we haven't been tracking it properly, but we haven't been tracking it properly. And we haven't been tracking our intensification rate, and we haven't been tracking our density rate. And that's something that is going to be implemented. And I actually have on the last page of the report some implementation items, and I actually had a motion in about what Councillor Bell had talked about and Councillor Chambers, but I took it out because I thought it's a bit cheeky, but apparently it wasn't. So it talks all about the actual reviewing for growth every year to council, and then every 5 years is the review to constantly update you on what is going on. And then since we're doing a new official plan, we technically don't have to do a new one, brand new one, until 10 years. But how long did it take us to do this? It's about we're probably starting this probably in 2027. So again, we're going to be anticipating this in the next 5 years, and we're going to have all that tracking data ready to go to do that. So we're more than happy to amend also additional information with motions to do that, because I actually have it in the report. It talks about implementation. It talks about tying everything, also the policies. We've tied things to not to put pressure on our other staff of the administration, but it's tied to the long-term financial plan and also planning for infrastructure as well. So there's ties in the official plan for that as well. So that's what we are planning on doing, but to strengthen that, we'd be happy to clarify any wording or make further motions as well on that. So,
Councillor Chambers, do you want to make a motion, or are you satisfied?
No, I just trying to generate discussion on policy rather than specific.
And I think with us saying it out loud that we know our numbers are going to be much greater than projected, I think we need to be keeping the school boards informed too, because they will have received numbers that they're banking on and they're counting on. I think that if we see something coming faster, and it is, that they should have the notice too, because you don't just build schools, especially when you're talking high schools and then Catholic schools and separate schools. We need to stay in touch with the school boards, I think. I don't know whether that's written down anywhere, but I think now that we've said it out loud that we are growing beyond our numbers, that they need to have proper notification. So as long as we can put that somewhere. Councillor Bell, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The focus on attainable and affordable housing in this document is, in my opinion, not sufficient. The evidence of the provision of this kind of housing by major developers is completely lacking. They do not address this one way or another. The burden is going to fall on the county and together with our partner in social services, the city. I would like to believe that what we said in the official plan is something that we will do, and that the plan says we will provide the widest range of price, occupancy and tenure. We declare that a key objective, and yet we don't have any targets, we don't have any mechanisms for making developers build what we want. And then finally we say the county may study in relation to attainable housing. I think it has to be, we will study. The burden, we need to recognize the burden is going to fall on the county and the city. And I don't think we say that in anywhere near a strongly worded enough way in the official plan. And I would like to make a motion that we strengthen the official plan wording to say the county will study it, the county recognizes the challenge, and the county will bring forward a plan together with the city to address the needs for affordable housing within this period of the official plan. So it's not like we'll do it tomorrow. We've got 28 years to do it. but I think it's not something we can solve tomorrow. It's going to take a lot of time. I come from a background, I lived in social housing when I was a kid. I remember just post the war, the government of the UK poured lots of money into council houses, as we called them there. It proved to be absolutely vital in terms of following up from the Second World War. We have our own challenge here. It's not a wartime, but we have a growing challenge. And I think we need to recognize it's the county that is going to have to face it, and the wording should be appropriate in the official plan. And I look for somebody to second that. Thank you, Lucas.
Councillor Oakley is your seconder. Any other conversation? Councillor Chambers and then Councillor House.
And speaking to the motion, and again, I agree with what Councillor Bella said, but there's some inflection that needs to be understood. Brant County is a little bit different than some municipalities in that there are rural areas and there are urban areas. Planning in rural areas is different than planning in urban areas for growth. If our official plan treats the county as homogeneous and policies are not differentiated between urban and rural, then that causes problems. And that's an area that will be problematic in terms of attaining a mix of housing in serviced areas is fundamentally a lot easier than providing a mix of houses in unserviced areas like Burford, for example, or Scotland. If it's not serviced, you're not going to have townhouses and row houses and high apartment buildings that may be more affordable. You're going to be relying on single family detached homes on acre lots because there's no servicing. So to treat the rural areas in the same manner, policy-wise, as an urban area, you have to make a distinction. So exactly what Councillor Bell is talking about works perhaps in urban areas, not so much in rural areas. Our official plan needs to reflect that, and I'm not so sure that it does, and that's why I didn't support the official plan. One of the reasons I didn't support the original official plan was that the rural areas need to be policy-wise different than the urban areas in Brant County. So maybe staff can comment on that. I've been told, and I can see areas where that has been modified to reflect some of my concerns, and perhaps they can comment on that.
Jessica's going to do that for you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers, thank you for raising those points. So we have dedicated an entire section to affordable and community housing where we did include the targets that are recognized between both the County of Brant and the city as a joint housing or service provider, recognizing that we didn't want to limit either the typologies or the ability to provide different housing options throughout the entire county. We've removed some of the more limiting references specifically to housing typologies throughout the plan. And that's just mainly to increase flexibility going forward. So in areas where perhaps servicing doesn't exist currently, it could in the future. So to eliminate redundant official plan amendments, that was the intention behind the flexible wording.
Could I just add to that? And the treatment of Burford is really weird in that it's a rural area with no servicing that has been classified as an urban area with maybe servicing in the future, but don't hold your breath. So if the expectation is to treat Burford as an urban system rather than a rural system, and there was reasons given for that, then how does that apply? How can you treat an unserviced village like Burford in our official plan as a urban area, urban system that is typically and fundamentally serviced like St. George. If the thinking is that, well, maybe in 10 years it's going to be serviced, don't think so fast because that may not happen. They've been saying that for 40 years. And there's a real reluctance to do that in Burford. So our official plan is kind of looking at a crystal ball saying it's going to be serviced, and maybe that crystal ball is a little bit cloudy. And that's a real flaw, I believe, in our official plan. And I've been told that that's provincial direction to do it that way, which is, I think we had it right before rather than now. So maybe you want to comment on that as well.
So through the mayor to Councillor Chambers, I think I'll invite some of the other policy team up to probably give some further guidance on that.
Through the mayor to Councillor Chambers. So I'll just close the affordable housing section. So talking about Burford specifically, or you want to talk about section 1.12 affordable housing? Meld it all together. Okay. Well, then Jessica actually was the crafter of a lot of these affordable housing, and we could talk about targets in a minute because we do have some draft wording as well for some motions with some targets itself. But in terms of the classification, I'm just very happy, Councillor Bell. Well, it's something you can discuss. But in terms of the rural settlement itself and housing typologies, what we've done is one of the biggest changes that's coming with the provincial policy statement is the flexibility in the different types of servicing infrastructure. So right now, in terms of allowing infrastructure in certain settlement areas, it's very limited. So there's flexibility coming to allow more communal system, different types of sort of tertiary systems, but as you know, it comes with a cost because there's usually municipal sharing agreements as well. But in terms of Burford itself, the classification, as I told you before, is not changed from the current official plan to now. It's just that the wording has been clarified because right now the colors on the map, as we say, haven't changed at all. They're exactly the same, and in terms of Burford it's right now in our current official plan, it's calling it a secondary urban settlement area. And we've constantly had questions over the years saying, well, what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything. There's nothing secondary about it. And is it rural? Is it urban? Is it secondary? Like, what is the classification? So the one issue, though, is it depends on the types of houses right now. If you have an area that's not serviced with municipal water and wastewater, but don't forget we have areas that are partially serviced as well, like Mount Pleasant and Oakland, parts of Keensville also have some or not or all, it depends on the actual housing typologies that you can predict. So it has affordability issues with targets because a lot of the affordability, it's talking more about higher density models and the percentage that you can give affordability to. So if you build a high rise and you say, well, I want 10% of that building to have affordable housing units, and you're building an apartment complex of 10 stories and there's going to be 150 units in it, well, you can do the math, 15 units. But if you're building one house by Habitat for Humanity on one single lot as one unit, so how is that going to play out with percentage and targets? So you can do county-wide targets based on joint plans with your service provider, because we're a joint Brantford branch together as one. And the problem is, even with census and the extrapolation, is you have to separate ourselves out sometimes. We are sort of our own entity. So you do county-wide targets, but then you also should do targets for the urban area based on densification, and separate it out with rural because of servicing issues as well, right? So that's one of the issues we found looking at affordable housing policies. If you assign targets to more denser areas, is if you're doing percentage, well, you may get more units out of it. Or what they do is like a cash in lieu payment. That's one of the things some municipalities do. It says, okay, if you're not going to give us units, you're going to give us cash, and we're going to put it in a pot, and we're going to buy land somewhere else to either build our own buildings I mean, Ottawa Housing does that. They almost do like an Ontario housing model there. Or we're going to buy the land and work with a partner like Habitat for Humanity or Indwell, and they'll build with us. But their rate of return is different, right? Because you're building sort of one thing at a time. So there's all those different models for affordability. But again, affordability and attainability, two separate things. But this is really like helping subsidize those on low incomes. How do we find housing for them? Because there's not a good solution right now. And working with developers, like we can work with the Brantford Housing, but as Jessica knows, she scoured the county for months looking for properties to do projects on, and we have no inventory. So we either look for land to build things on with funds, or we work with developers and assign some targets, whether they stick and the province keeps them in. So there is definitely a rural-urban divide with servicing about the amount of units you can provide based on the densification and the serviceability of that area for affordability. So just to keep that in mind. But a lot of our targets right now, I mean, we are the county of Brant. We are one county, and we have to either do assignments for the whole county or sort of divide it up rural urban. You know, you have to think about that as a whole too. So our intensification target is actually like a county-wide thing, and density, and also like our population. So we're working together as a county. But is something like this going to be focused in one specific area? So that's some of the things you have to sort of think about with that. Hope that answers. It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but happy to answer. And also Jessica's here too.
Councillor Howes, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jen or perhaps Jessica. I share Councillor Bell's concerns about affordable housing, modest housing. I'm not completely sure that the motion as it's currently written is the right way to approach this. Like, one of the elements that Councillor Bell mentioned was mechanisms. And if we look at section 1.12.14 on page 5-17, the county may create and implement a range of planning and regulatory incentives that encourage affordable housing and community housing. Such incentives may include, but are not limited to, and then there's 15 bullets. And I know from some informal conversations with our planning staff that once the official plan is established, there are opportunities for us to bring forward mechanisms to achieve what we want to achieve. I don't think we necessarily need to get too detailed in this document. And I'm just wondering if staff could speak a little bit more about that and about how this is just a framework for some of the future mechanisms within a goal that I think we all share.
Through the mayor to Councillor House. So that's correct. So the summary is completely correct. The list is not a complete or exhaustive list. It's not intended to be. Again, we've identified some of the tools, but there are many that we can use to either increase attainable or affordable housing as we continue to move forward and as we continue to grow throughout the entire county, not just within the urban or rural systems. And we look forward to doing just that once the new official plan is approved. Yes.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to respond to Councillor Chambers, that yes, there is a difference between the urban and rural areas, but just specifically to talk about Burford. Burford, as we both know from our social services work, there is a demand for, I think it was 57 people looking for senior accommodation. And we do have some social housing there. It's not on 3/4 acre lots, it's actually Sunset Villas. And I think we have a model there that we could replicate. And I actually have a plan to do that, which I've shared with a few people. But I think it is possible that we can deal with some of the rural areas as well. The Mayor's Task Force has set targets, but they're only till 2031. We have a plan here to 2051. I would like to understand what we can do with inclusionary zoning, because I was surprised to see the wording in the document in regard of inclusionary zoning. It did not refer to the need to be next to a transit hub, which I think is what was there before. Do we now have more flexibility, and can we demand more of our developers? And what level of inclusionary zoning can we shoot for? Can we shoot for 10% of all the new houses to be built will be affordable or attainable?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell. So that's a fantastic question, and thank you for asking that this evening, because I'm sure you're not the only one wondering about it. So inclusionary zoning has been identified under Part 5 of the plan. There aren't too many policies relating to that at this particular time, and it's for good reason. The province did extend the ability to utilize inclusionary zoning based on either protected major transit station areas, as you've identified, or through community planning permit systems, CPPSs. So community planning permit systems are another tool that municipalities can use to basically review development proposals, or to implement different tools such as inclusionary zoning through municipal bylaws. So once the new official plan is approved, we as the County of Brant have the ability to establish a community planning permit system. And once we do that, we also have the ability to undertake the necessary regulatory requirements that the province has identified through the Planning Act to implement inclusionary zoning as well in the future. But we have some work to do before we can actually implement inclusionary zoning.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, I presume that means we can't retroactively do it. So most of the, was it 3,600 homes in Paris that are already approved, they're gone. We can't do anything about working with those developers to impose an inclusionary zoning element on them. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell, that is correct, specifically for inclusionary zoning as a tool. Yes, there are other tools that we can use a little bit quicker than inclusionary zoning once the new official plan is implemented, but you are correct.
Okay, thank you. If I may just have one more comment on this one, Mr. Mayor. We are tracking what we call smaller residential units, less than 130 square meters, or in my world, 1,400 square feet. That's not a small house. That would not be the kind of house that I would be thinking of in terms of an affordable house. And I would like that we perhaps have a parallel set of statistics where we look at how many houses, perhaps less than 1,000 square feet, are being built, and that would give me more confidence that we're actually targeting the community we want. And I think in that respect, on page 8.2 of the document, where you talk about affordable and attainable housing, you talk about the lowest 60% of people, lowest 60% of income people. What would that translate into in terms of what house could they afford to buy? What rent could they afford to pay on that if they're in the lowest 60% of income? So the reason I ask is I look at the housing supply in Paris. The new townhomes that are being built on Rest Acres Road start off at $700,000. And I just don't know whether that actually equates to being in the lowest 60% of income earners and whether they could afford it.
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell, so you are correct. So the definition is based on a very specific percentile. That's the intention, to ensure that the displacement of income earned for households that fall at that percentile are not displaced in regards to housing, and that they actually can afford to maintain their housing accommodation, whether it be ownership or rental, and then also be able to live, purchase groceries, be able to afford transportation, etc. In order to understand how the affordability would factor in for the local housing market, we would need to undertake our own study to be able to identify that in relationship to what housing is retailing for at what rate, and then identify exactly the population and demographics that we have at those specific percentiles, and be able to confidently identify that and implement some further policies to reflect that. But I do appreciate your comment also on the 130 meters squared for attainable homes. So that is something that we came up with based on the average housing size for attainable homes, not necessarily affordable homes, recognizing they are different. And once we undertake some further studies for the local market, we could definitely amend those and align them so that they reflect something a little more current in the future.
I certainly would appreciate that, through you, Mr. Mayor. I would certainly appreciate that. And I would appreciate if you could translate that 60%, lowest 60% income into what it actually means in terms of what you can afford here in Paris, either for rental or for purchase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I did meet with Co-op Housing from Waterloo last week. I met them and we had a meeting here in the office, and they've invited Allison and I to go and look at their model, which works beautifully in Waterloo. I approached them and said there's a lot of people that only bring in, as I said before, I've told this council, $2,400, $2,600, $2,800 a month. And this would be completely co-op, run by the county, staffed by the county, and people, it would be completely geared to income. So some people would pay $650 a month, some people would pay $550 a month, and some people could pay, and they would be different variations of themselves. And the model works. It's not something that someone's thought about that could happen. It's working in Waterloo beautifully, and Alice and I are going to go and take a look at them, and they're perfectly happy to share their model with us. So we are working on that if it makes you feel a little bit better. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. You want to leave it on the floor? It's been seconded. Can you read the motion again for me, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Your Worship. And this is my wording. I have not yet heard back from policy planning, so jump in if it needs to be changed. That the official plan target regarding affordable housing be strengthened, and that the county staff bring forward a plan to meet with the city to address the needs for affordable housing.
I think there's a little more. I think it's the acceptance that it is a county problem, or a county issue, not a problem, a county issue that has to be managed. And I think we need to be explicit that the county will manage it together with its partner in the city. And we need to have the mechanisms to do that, and the exchange we just had about data and statistics all forms a part of that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the policy planners can do much better than I can in terms of putting the right words together. I think they understand the intent of what I think we need.
And I think the county's staying as the county right now when we're investigating things like co-op. If we do that research and it works for us, and we don't want any city, I'm not just speaking of Brantford, but I wouldn't want any partners to slow us down if we wanted to try something. And this is a very small machine that we're part of here, and I don't want it to get any bigger to slow us down if something seems right, and I don't want to jump through bigger hoops. So if we could keep that separated, I would appreciate it. Anything else before we call the vote? I think it's pretty inclusive now. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you. Who's next?
If nobody wants to go, I've got one more.
Oh, stop it.
Sorry. You shouldn't give me all this paper to read. That's the problem. So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, how are we going to deal with the requests of last night before I get into the one that I want to particularly talk about? Are they going to come back later?
No, they won't come up at all unless you bring them up. Staff has an opinion on everything. They can't recommend anything, but they can tell you what they think of the delegations from last night.
Yeah. So let me start, if I may, by saying that we had 2 or 3 delegates at the end of last night who were passionate about the need to minimize the drawdown on agricultural lands. And I think we must have had 4 or 5. I think Ella Haley thought it was about 1,000 acres that had come up last night, just last night. But I specifically wanted to talk about the Papal lands. And I went back and I looked at the meeting of July the 29th of 2021, and it was very close. We had a very healthy debate about whether we should include or not the Papa lands in the boundary adjustment. And I think there are some people who believe the boundary already accommodated it. I believe that the decision we took at that meeting said, you know, council recommends that staff consider looking at expanding the boundary adjustment. And I think they've come back with, on page 313, the Cainsville Site-Specific Policy Area, CN1. I think that is basically the staff saying, we recommend that we extend the settlement area in Cainsville to include that particular parcel of land. It was a very close decision on that meeting. I would like to make a motion that we reconsider that motion. The reason I say that is it was 6-5. The decision was taken, and 3 of the members of the 6 that said yes are no longer on council. And I find it difficult to ask the balance of council, the new members of council, to step in without reflecting on that. And I think I'll go through my arguments about why I think it shouldn't be included. We had it that very same evening.
Councillor Bell, are you going to make a motion then?
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion. My motion is that I have to do it this way. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Alicia, I think I have to make a motion to reconsider the decision of July the 29th, 2021 on this matter. But I can be corrected.
Yep.
Through your worship to Councillor Bell, under the procedural bylaw, as this is a new term of council, it could come up as new business. It does not require a motion of reconsideration.
Okay, thank you. That helps. Then my motion is that we deny the inclusion of special site-specific policy CN1. And I'll happily talk to it if there is a seconder to the motion.
Okay. Before I ask for a seconder, though, you don't have to bring it up at all, and it's not going to be considered. I don't believe it was going to be considered until you brought it up, but we'll get a seconder anyway to get it on the floor. Sorry, I mean, it's in our official plans. I mean, we are going to approve it tonight. Finally. Okay. As it stands in our official plan, that's all you're wanting to revisit. I'm wishing to take out that section. Okay. Councillor Oakley is your seconder. Discussion? I would like to speak to it if I may. Okay. Yeah. So the reasoning, I mean, it was a very good debate we had that night. And I know we went from a position, I started from the position that we'd just been listening to a delegate who said, I have 82 hectares of dry employment land in the south of Cainsville that I can't find a use for. I'd like to convert it into residential usage. And the very same meeting, the Papa Lands representative came along and said, I want to convert agricultural to dry employment, or it ended up as dry employment. It didn't start that way. And it seemed to me inappropriate. And why would we want to take out agricultural land, more agricultural land, when we already have a stock of dry employment land that is not being used? And I'm still struggling with that simple bit of logic. I know Councillor Chambers would say you can never have enough employment lands, and I can appreciate that's a perspective that we may have, but I would like to balance it off against the drawdown that we have on agricultural lands. And the Apple representative last night basically sort of, when I went back to the meeting of July 2021, he reluctantly said, yes, this is mainly grade 3 land, a little bit of grade 4 land, almost tried to dismiss it as if it was land that you wouldn't want to use anyway. And that's not the story we heard last night from Ella Haley. It's not the story we've heard from multiple people who have written in and raised the same concerns. So my same basic concern is that, you know, why do we want to create more land, more employment land where we've got plenty? Why do we want to take agricultural land out when one of our key objectives in our official plan is to minimize the drawdown on agricultural land? I'm not a farmer. I just see it in those simple terms. We got enough of one. Why do we need to take from another? And that's my position. Comments? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to support my colleague's motion. From my understanding with speaking with staff, we have an imbalance in rapid residential growth, and insufficient employment land growth. And sadly, that's going to require that to correct that imbalance is going to require some changes of land use. And I think this is one example where this portion of that larger piece of land makes sense to be employment land. So I won't be supporting the motion to change the way it currently sits.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I won't be supporting the motion either. This is a piece of property that is far more ready to be developed than the other lands that Councillor Bell mentioned from from that meeting back whenever it was in June, July, or whenever, I can't remember now. That land has got problems. It will be developed someday, but this land of the Papal lands is ready to be done now. If there's an opportunity to get some good dry development area, industrial land in there. So I will not be supporting this motion.
Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like my ward mate here, I will not support Councillor Bell's motion, and I appreciate this will come to the surprise of many of my neighbors because I'm probably the councillor most directly affected by this. It is down the road from me, and I've heard from a number of folks, and I do hear their concerns, and I recognize them. But for the reasons that Councillor Coleman has noted, it's time, and I'm reflecting on some of the comments last night with regards to farmers. I'm a relatively new farmer. I've had to start with some helping hands from the ground up. We have a landowner here who signaled that it's no longer time for them to farm this land, and they have another proposal, and they've been willing to work with the county, and I think that's important because if they are not successful with what is included in the plan and what staff have recommended, there's a very real possibility this could find itself on the open market, and the next steps could be very different. The services are there. It's nearly adjacent to the city. I think it's not long before it's landlocked by either some fairly dense residential construction and folks looking for jobs or other industrial. Certainly, I know this has implications for the neighborhood, but I think the time is right, and I can't support taking it out. So I'll leave it at that.
Any other comments, Councillor Chambers?
Could I just ask a question of clarification? The property is presently designated as the property owner wishes. Is that correct? Yes. It's my understanding that is correct. And the motion is to remove that against the property owner's wishes.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Chambers. That's a good question. So I've got a lot of questions on that. Even one of the delegations last night asked us, is it in the boundary? Is it outside the boundary? So and there was confusion why the delegation came back last night. So first of all, the delegation, the owner, Mr. Papel, came back last night just because he heard there was some opposition, and he just wanted to clarify the intent with his consultant that they supported what was put in the new final official plan. So that is the amended minor rounding out, because if you remember, they came in July 2021 and then December 2021 with the whole parcel was like 300 hectares. Then they modified the proposal for the minor rounding out on the lands just down at the south of Garden Avenue, and that was the only parcel considered. And then it went back to staff. Then they resubmitted all the information with, planning justification. They did a review of MDS and everything. And then we took that, submitted to the province, never heard back. So what we've done is that we've now included that minor rounding out within the Keansville settlement boundary because we cannot have a parcel of employment land outside of the boundary with an agricultural conversion. It's against our delegated authority with the OREG. We have to include it in the settlement area boundary. What we've done with the site-specific wording is to acknowledge, especially with the dry industrial use, until servicing may come, because it wasn't originally included in the Class EA study. So we've done that. We're happy to strengthen this wording as well. It's on 4.3 of the official plan, CN1 special policy area. The owner's happy with this wording, this consultant. So yeah, just that's a good question. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I believe Mr. Walton is coming up to clarify what I just said.
Through the mayor, hopefully to the planners, I hope that this piece of land, that there's some flexibility here that when we do the Class EA that we, because it's not finished yet, that we possibly include. So this would be crazy for us to do the servicing study out there and leave this outside of it and then come back and do it again. So if it's going to be in, it should be in. Could have some designation on there that it can't have a heavy industrial use on it, heavy water use, but it should be serviced. Thank you.
Alicia's going to read the motion again.
Could I just a couple of comments before Alicia?
All right. Councillor Bell.
Two comments. One, just to get clarity from Councillor Howes. You're saying you support it because you think we'll get more property tax income if it's an industrial land rather than an employment land rather than agricultural. Is that what I understand?
No, that's not what I said. What my point on it was that we need increased employment land opportunities in various parts of the county, and I see this as a viable one.
But is 82 hectares not enough? Hectares, sorry. I thought it was 82 hectares in that southern parcel. The one that wanted to be transformed into residential. I think that was 82 hectares. No, but, sorry, Councillor Howes asked me, he said, we're looking for more employment lands. And I'm saying, is 82 hectares not enough? Now, what is enough? I mean, we could have gone further then. So that I find a challenge. And if I may ask of Jen, is the boundary adjustment already done, or does the boundary adjustment come into effect when the official plan is approved? Because the reason I ask that, because there are residents of the county who believe it's outside of the current settlement boundary. And it may well be, but it may not be if we approve this plan.
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell, we have already discussed that with the delegation who came. She's emailed us multiple times today. So we've clarified that approach, and then the fact that we cannot have it left outside the boundary.
So, but
so
the reason the boundary will change is because we approve this change of usage from agricultural to employment.
Correct. It's called a minor rounding out of the settlement area boundary.
That drives the boundary change.
That's correct, and that's included in the new OP, which will go to the province for their approval.
Yeah. So I'll make one final comment, and then you can call the vote if you would like to, Mr. Mayor. I really struggle with this council, and I struggle, I'm going to say it directly, with the farmers in this council. I really do not understand the position you take about the loss of agricultural land. Now, I thought you would be the champions of retaining agricultural land, and yet you appear to be the group of people that constantly are at the forefront of supporting the changes from agricultural to other usage. And I just don't understand, and I want to understand why you take that position. It's just entirely illogical to me.
Councillor Kyle and then Councillor Garneau. They're going to explain it to you, I think.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Bell. I think from where I sit, I recognize that farmland loss is a major issue. I also recognize that there's people moving to our communities for whom we need to provide housing and we need to provide jobs. So we have to balance where we're saving those lands. So when I look at the map, Councillor McAlpine just had it out actually, and it shows the soil composition map of the county. Not only is that property really close to where it can already be serviced, but it's a class 4 soil type, which is not great. I think if it was me and they were talking about somewhere where there was a class 1 or a class 2 soil, I think I would be much more concerned. I think we have to look at the spots that make sense to do these things. And in this case, while I hate to see the farmland go, and for all of the reasons that everyone was here yesterday to tell us why, I can agree with all of them. But we as a council have to make some decisions that balance out the need for the housing and the employment while also preserving the land. So if we can make smart decisions on where to put those things, I think that's the best that we can try to do.
Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Councillor Kyle says it well. When I look at this parcel as someone who set out to buy a farm as your first and only farm, a property like the one that we're discussing right now, not only is the soil poor, if that was your only source of farming income, it's my understanding that it's without a house. So it's going to come at a premium to purchase it because it is so adjacent to the city, and likely I think the long-term writing is on the wall there, but there isn't a place to live if that was your only source of income. And you know, as farmers, we are in business too, and I've struggled with this. I studied rural history. I didn't grow up in farming, but there's a sense that farmers are entirely altruistic. But at the end of the day, we also have to provide for our families. And when I look at this parcel, I joked with the landowner. Actually, the Class 4 soils are for tender fruits, which might suggest a vineyard. Certainly, this wouldn't be a site where one would consider that. Up the road on my place, we're successfully growing apples. So just because things are in proximity doesn't necessarily mean we've got to continue with the fruit. We've got a lot of apples and oranges there. And I think with what we have, as others have said, the proximity, it's really to force this individual to continue to farm it. There are others who could speak more on the cash cropping side, but I don't know that you could even rent it successfully for its costs because it is quite up and down.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to me, there's good development and there's really poor development. And if this was going into housing, I'll state it right now, I wouldn't support it. But this land can be serviced quicker than most lands that we've got, and it's right there. And I'm supporting it, that it stays where it is.
Councillor Miller, you're next.
Very briefly, I think it's not a bad spot given its location, its prime location to the 403. And I don't know how many times we hear about truck traffic, and people don't want to see truck traffic driving by them. So if we can keep the employment lands near the busy corridors, I suggest we do that. I will say, and I did appreciate, I really appreciate the people that came up and spoke in favor of the farmland. And you can't go 0 or 100. You can't go black or all white. There's got to be some kind of, unfortunately, middle ground. And that's what we face when we sit around this table. We got to make it work. And when you make it work, you annoy everybody. And when you annoy everybody, generally, you know it's working. So that's where we're at. And I don't think I supported it before. I will support it now. They have modified it. It's not as big. I talked to the previous counselor from Ward 5, and she said it wasn't the greatest farmland. So, given all that, I think we should keep it in.
Any other comments? Councillor Chambers.
I support the way it is now, and I'm not going to be accused of not appreciating farmland. I'm one of the ones that actually do it, and I'm proud of it. You will be criticized wherever you develop something. You're using agricultural land. You put a house there, you're using agricultural land. So if you want to preserve all the agricultural land in the province, then stop building anything. You have to balance. You have to recognize that there are locations where it makes sense. And as Councillor Coleman and as Councillor Miller has said, this location makes sense for development. The Highway 253, parallel to 403, it's a service road that is unparalleled, and I think someday in 60 or 70 years you're going to see that as a service road, and you're going to see employment lands that to provide jobs for the people that are moving to the area. And you'll still see the farmers out there cultivating their tobacco and vegetables and growing corn and creating dust and creating havoc for all the urbanites that are moving into the rural areas that complain about using up farmland. So I support it 100%.
Any other comments? I can't support it either, but mine is because of the people on Johnson Road. I've sat on many a porch on Johnson Road, and they have the luxury of seeing the tail end of that property in fields. And I've sat on porches, and it's a wonderful place to live. And unfortunately, they're going to feel the impact from this too. It's not always about the front of a property; it's about where the property ends up. And I feel badly about that, but I can't support it either, Councillor Bell. Madam Clerk, could you read the motion?
Yes, through your worship, the motion is, whereas a site-specific request, number 101, pardon? Apologies.
Councillor Coleman has one more thing to say. A recorded vote, please, Madam Clerk. Yes, you can read it first, and then we'll record it.
Through your worship, the motion listed is, whereas a site-specific request, number 101, was received through the county's municipal comprehensive review to expand the Canesville settlement area boundary and change the designation of lands known as 2920040502380 Papel Road from agriculture to employment to allow for future development of employment lands on private services. Therefore, be it resolved that the council remove site-specific request 101 from Green Life Proteins from the inclusion into the Canesville settlement area boundary to include lands known as 2920040502380 Papel Road and modify the land use designation from general employment to agriculture as illustrated on Schedule A5 of the new official plan.
Thank you. We're all clear what we're voting on? All those in favor? Oh, we're going to do a recorded vote, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Coleman.
Right, you vote no.
Councillor Coleman, did you vote no? Okay. Councillor Garneau.
No.
Councillor Kyle.
No.
Councillor McAlpine.
No.
Councillor Oakley.
No.
Councillor House.
No.
Councillor Bell.
Absolutely yes.
Councillor Pierce.
No.
Councillor Chambers. Councillor Miller.
No.
Mayor Bailey.
No.
The vote is 1 yay, 10 nays. The motion fails.
Councillor Miller, you're next.
I have two I'm going to move tonight. This will be one of two. And we had a delegation last night, so it's for 26th 8th Concession Road. I'll move it. Looking for a seconder.
Seeking a secondary, Councillor Coleman. You can speak to it, Councillor Miller.
Just where they're looking for, it's a settlement area boundary expansion. There has been some employment lands along the east side of Bishop's Gate. I know some of you, Councillor House especially, have been out there. Triggers and Bows is out there, and a few others. And that land has, as Delia will tell you, has been it's sought after. It's very much sought after. Don't know why, but it is. And the county's done a really nice job of attracting a lot of mixed businesses. So if one area slows down, the others pick it up. And Triggers and Bows never slows down. So there is a need for more employment lands, and I think part of that has triggered this application. And I do support the application for that reason. A second reason is it is on a main thoroughfare, that being Bishopsgate Road. And if we do see that 403 Bishopsgate interchange, it just makes it all the more attractive. So it's on the floor. Moved and seconded. I support it, but we'll see what the rest of the council thinks.
Anyone want to speak to that? Councilor Chambers, you're first.
I support it as well for several reasons. First of all, it is on the corridor, and in the future, if there is an interchange, which I may not see, but the the buffer between the village of Burford and this designation, it is there. The area does have what used to be Jeff Bryant Trucking. I forget what they call it now. Contrans, or no, that's Halls. Anyway, there's Keith Halls and Precision and Contrans is what they're called now. Across the road, Triggers and Bows and Roswell Concrete, and then we've just approved across the road. So it makes sense as a developed area for that particular use, and recognizing that it does use agricultural land, but like I said before, wherever you put something, it's going to use agricultural land. So I support it.
Anyone else want to speak? Seeing no one else that wants to speak, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Councillor Miller, do you want to bring your second one forward?
Yeah, this one's not quite as nuanced. It's just, it refers to one of the correspondence we got last night, and that's from CN Rail. And I'm a big proponent of rail, recognizing, you know, the fact that it has 100-to-1 energy efficiency over moving things by truck. I do see it as I do see them growing in importance in our community, for moving things. And they wrote their letter. I read what's in our official plan, 5-103. And they have some recommendations. And one of the things they talk about in their letter, I thought it was a really good letter. They talk about the D6 guidelines. I don't know what the D6 guidelines all entail, but I do know it has a lot to do with incompatible development near rail yards, rail lines. So I guess my question, I'll ask first to staff, if they feel that they've adequately addressed CN's concerns as far as mitigating, say, incompatible development near that. And I say that as a rail proponent, seeing rail being used more in the future, but also as councillors, when there's issues between different land users, that's when we get the phone calls. So it'd be nice if we could also mitigate future problems. So do they feel that what is in there now sufficient to address what it is asked?
Who's going to come forward? Jessica?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Meller, and Jessica's coming up as well. Just to note for that item of correspondence, we received it extremely late. And there's a recommendation in the staff report, as you know, to consider late submissions and any tweaks we need to make afterwards, because we only received it very late last week on Wednesday afternoon. But one of the things they did miss in the correspondence, they didn't look at our hazard mapping schedules, Schedule C. We actually have the buffer on there that they requested already. They just acknowledged, oh, we didn't look at your mapping. So, but Jess, we can talk briefly about your question about the policy itself with land use compatibility, and also the changes also coming to the PPS. So.
Thank you, Jen, and through the mayor to Councillor Bell. So, or sorry, it was Councillor Bell, yes? Oh, sorry, Councillor Miller, sorry, my apologies. We have included specific policies relating to major facilities within the plan. We have aligned those policies with both the PPS, the growth plan, and typically what we see comments come through for development applications, specifically from such agencies as CN Rail. They will continue to be circulated on development applications in the future as well. We've done our best, but as Jem pointed out, there is a recommendation in the staff report to make any further inclusions based on that late correspondence.
If it pleases the mayor, I will be very happy to leave that. I would rather leave it in your capable hands. If you see it that something should be there from the rails, please put it in, and I trust you guys. So I won't bring order.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Since we're dealing with the request, I'll speak to the Scooby request in New Durham, and I'll move that it be supported. I think the presentation speaks for itself. This is an expansion contiguous to the property that they already have. It's it's at the back of the property in the center of the concession, so it has very little impact. It's used mostly for storage. And just a comment, it's a poster child for a development that should be on unserviced property because of the amount of acreage for storage. And I think the Stoobies have indicated that they're willing to work with the county and make the development as good as it can be for the neighbors. Hopefully some of the assessment garnered by the inclusion of the industrial lands can be used to upgrade the roads, and perhaps the only complaint that I get from Stoobies is from the property owners neighboring Stoobies is the truck traffic that's trying to find its way to the plant. But I'll move that it be
for those of council that didn't see, Councillor Miller seconded that before we spoke to it. Did you want to put something in your motion that they do something for the roads around where they are? Yeah, Councillor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, speaking to the motion from Councillor Chambers there, as I pointed out last night when the delegation was in, I appreciate the fact that they're giving up some of the land, I guess it would be on the west side, that's zoned industrial right now, on the frontage on Muir Line. But I don't feel that the entire parcel has to be changed over to employment. There's a lot of wooded area there. To me, it doesn't make sense to take the whole parcel and change it over. I appreciate the fact that it's going to be used for storage, and I also agree with the fact that it's perfect that it's in behind. It's not going to bother any neighbors. I support what they're doing. I support their business as a whole. I can't support changing the entire parcel when it's not required for what they said it was going to be used for. That's my opinion on that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to that before we vote? Councillor McAlpine? Is your microphone on?
I was just wondering about getting a comment from staff about that natural heritage corridors or whatever.
Yep, through the mayor to Councillor McAlpine, I got Michelle up here, and that came up yesterday. There's some question about if they were expanding in the woodlot. It's actually part of the natural heritage system, and in terms of our settlement area boundary expansion criteria, we have it actually in the motion already to exclude, but I'll get Michelle to.
Thank you, through the mayor to Councillor Pierce. So it does contain a woodland area as well as a wetland. So I think certainly when staff had discussions with the applicant, it was noted that the preference would be to keep it outside of the additional lands. So the motion could be modified to exclude the natural heritage system that's designated.
Thank you. Councillor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. If it was noted like that, I could fully support it. I don't see the need for all that land to be in there and the entire parcel. It just doesn't make sense. But if it's separated out, as staff is saying there, then I can support it. Again, I want it to be clear that I support what they're doing. I just don't support those lands being changed over.
Councillor Chambers, do you want to reply to that?
I think that will take care of itself through this zoning of the property with the natural heritage and the open space or whatever they call it nowadays. So that's fine.
So maybe we should hear the motion again, Alicia, just to make sure that it's clear.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Chambers. Whereas a site-specific request, number 96, was received through the county's municipal comprehensive review to expand the New Durham settlement area boundary and change the designation of lands located at 20-40 Muir Road South and 348 Harley Road from agriculture to employment to allow for a future development of employment lands, and whereas council finds merit in the request based on justification provided within attachment 1 of RPT 262-23 for the final new official plan, therefore be it resolved that council approves site-specific request number 96 from GSP Group on behalf of the landowner to expand the New Durham settlement area boundary outside of the natural heritage system and modify the land use designation as illustrated on Schedule A3 from agriculture to general employment in the new official plan.
Everyone's clear? You said it beautifully. Any other questions or comments before we call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bell.
Don't want people to go to sleep. Just following on from last night's delegations, I was surprised to see the Tregoning development. That was pretty new to me, and I've seen, as many of you will have seen today, a concern amongst the community in Glen Morris that they were also taken by surprise and would have liked more time to have had a consultation on this. So I'm not saying I don't support it. I just don't think we should support it now. I think it's one of those that we should just move.
Our point, we're just bringing things forward. If it's not brought forward, we don't have to discuss it. We got a lot to discuss. So let's not spend time on things.
Anything that was brought forward last night was just for information, and we don't have to discuss anything.
So to be clear then, by not talking about it doesn't mean it's approved.
It goes away.
It goes away. Until it comes back. Thank you. Then that's good. Then thank you, Councillor Miller. I appreciate that. One final one from me, and this is a concern that I have, that I think other people have, that the efforts we're making to create more employment lands along the 403 seem to be so far resulting only in the provision of warehousing. And it kind of plays to the conversation I had earlier about affordable and attainable housing. The employment opportunities that warehousing will bring will not support people buying properties that are currently being built on Rest Acres Road. And I know we've got to follow this exercise with the comprehensive zoning bylaw, and really it's a question to staff. Is it possible in the zoning bylaw to be prescriptive that we do not permit warehousing on certain of those lands?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Bell, that is a possibility. We can prescribe anything related to the land use in specific. I will say as well that Watson is preparing that employment land strategy for us, and that will give us some more insight in maybe what those lands would be best used for. And we can relate that into the zoning bylaw for sure.
Yeah, if I just may follow on, I think my understanding was I had this figure in mind that over 80% of the most recent employment opportunities that we have realized have been warehousing. Is that correct?
I'm uncertain of the exact number. I'm not sure, maybe if Allison knows for sure.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I'm just speaking from the economic development standpoint. I'd fully support that. I've always been supportive of higher order employment along the 403, and I think we do need to examine the zoning there. In terms of warehousing and logistics, we're getting that because that's what our land can accommodate.
So in other words, changing the zoning to a higher order and excluding logistics, I think is a good thing. However, it does mean we might have to wait a little bit for something higher order, and that comes down to the amenities in the area. It comes down to transit. It comes down to the type of servicing and natural gas. It's not just water, wastewater. It's all those other things that we're seeing that we can't accommodate right now. So I think from a zoning perspective, I would certainly support that from economic development. And we are getting a lot of logistics. Everybody is getting it. As far as requests go, a lot of it's landing here because we have land available that allows it and it can accommodate it.
If just one final thought on that, Mr. Mayor, if I may. This is a plan that runs till 2051. We don't have to rush to fill all of the lands that we've just supported, 286 hectares of new employment lands. I'd hate to be in the situation where we're just rushing to fill them, then we find we need more. I would rather we took the time to try and upgrade, diversify the economic base that we have along the 403, attract in those higher end employment opportunities. So if we're going to do that in the employment land strategy, I'm happy with the answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Councillor Chambers?
Just a couple of comments with that, and I agree it's nice to have a diversity. There's a couple of issues associated with that. First of all, we are not the landowners, and it's the landowner who brings the applications forward, and we have moved away from the strategy of county-owned industrial lands, which we may want to revisit, and maybe we should revisit. These are some of the things we can talk about when we talk about our strategic plan and how our strategic plan can meld with our official plan to do the things that John is talking about, because it is good to have diversity. And I'll go back to what I said before. Since we don't have our own land, we're dependent on private landowners to develop employment lands. We need to compensate for some of that with additional land designations, additional areas for designations, and that kind of thing. I was impressed by the presentation that apparently there's an application for an official plan amendment on the lands on the second concession by Cargill as an industrial subdivision with I don't know whether it's 13 lots or 20 lots or something like that. That kind of thing is really needed. If you look in that area, just on that stretch of road, you have two businesses, Hunter Plumbing and Bob Shellard's, whatever he calls himself, that are would be ideally located in a situation like that. If you ever go to Norwich on the airport road, you'll see that there are buildings that the municipality of Norwich purchased and developed, and those are popular. And if we can start developing or attracting those type of employment opportunities and employment assessment, then we are diversifying, and that's the kind of stuff that we need to do. It's difficult when we don't own it. We have to depend on developers, but that's why we have an economic development department, and that's why we need to support that. And when it comes to the zoning, to support that as well.
So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just to take in Councillor Chambers' point, yes, we don't own the land, but I guess the control we do have is in the zoning. And just a point of clarity, if we approve our official plan, we're approving another 286 hectares of employment lands. Does the current zoning go with that approval, or would the new zoning apply to the new official plan areas? Because we might impose a more restrictive set of zoning on those 286 hectares than we would today. Just a clarity for me.
Brandon.
Through the mayor, the zoning that's in place today would stand. So the employment designation would appear underneath of it, and then it's our responsibility to update the zoning within a year. So generally speaking, you would update it to match the employment designation with the specifics that we're looking for in mind with land use.
I think I understood what you said. The answer is, if I'm owning a parcel of land on Bethel Road that's going to become employment lands, today's zoning bylaw stands. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chambers.
I'll just make one comment about that. It's fine to think that you can bend private landowners to develop what you want them to develop, but welcome to the OLT and welcome to the Panatoni adventure, and that's what you have to be cognizant about. And zoning, updating the comprehensive zoning bylaw is an important exercise. So it's maybe harder than you think it is to tell developers what to do.
Thanks for the flashback. Is there any other comments, Councillor Garneau?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I have two in the Oak Hill area. One is a question of clarification on behalf of the landowner, and the second is going to be a proposal from last night. So perhaps I'll start with the question that's site-specific number 114, 299 to 301 Oak Hill Drive. I was contacted by the landowner with regards to this minor rounding out of the settlement boundary there to confirm. And I have had a conversation with staff. The landowner just wanted it raised tonight on the record that the 170-meter rounding out was from the top of the Davidson cul-de-sac, not from Oak Hill Drive, please.
Through the mayor, I can confirm that that is the case, and we've been working with the applicant in particular. They'll be submitting their spatial data to us for our GIS system, and we've tried to replicate that in our system as best we can. So that 170 meters is from that cul-de-sac.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then, if I may, so we're to site-specific number 109, that's 253 Oak Hill Drive. That was the proposal from last evening from the Angrish group for that minor rounding out fronting Oak Hill Drive. I do have the motion prepared by staff, and thank you for that. Perhaps I'll read the resolution part, but do you want the whereas clauses as well?
I'd like a seconder first. Oh. Councillor Coleman. Now you can do all your whereas.
Whole thing?
The whole thing. No, you don't have to do the whole thing.
Okay. So, therefore, be it resolved that the council approves site-specific request number 109 from the Angrish group on behalf of the landowner to expand the Oak Hill settlement area boundary to include the minor rounding out on lands located at 253 Oak Hill Drive and modify the land use designation from agriculture to village community area lands as illustrated on Schedule A18 of the new official plan. And if I may speak to it?
Yep, absolutely.
I fear I'm a farmer again, paving over farmland right now. Similar to my comments with regards to the Papal lands, this is another site where it makes sense. We are close to servicing. It's only a matter of time before it is landlocked by residential development, and what we have is a parcel of that farm property that is not farmable due to slopeline issues at this time and soil classes. So I do support this coming forward, and I'm bringing it on behalf of the landowner. Thank you.
Any comments? This is for Wilbur Long, I think. Any other comments? No? Okay, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Seeing nothing, we're going to take a 10-minute break so we can redo the motions that have been passed by council and give it to staff so they can present the entire official plan in 10 minutes. Thank you. We're going to call the meeting back to order. Jen's going to come up and speak to her report. Then I'm going to be looking for, they've reviewed the report. They're happy with the way it stands and reads. And I'm going to ask for someone to move the report, second the report, we'll call the vote.
All right, thank you, Mayor Bailey. We're just finishing up the motions here. I type 87 words per minute, so you'll just have to give me a motion. We're just crafting some wording just based on the actual motions that were passed. So we have some additional wording that we talked about. So the staff report actually at the very end, the last preamble, it actually notes that as amended by any motions approved by council tonight, but we could actually read them out as well, but they'll be included in the minutes. So that would be up to yourselves and the clerk to discuss. But if there's any modifications to the recommendation, we have all the motions that you approved tonight already on record. And as I noted yesterday in my presentation, we went through the report, but at this point, we are at the process with including all the motions and site-specific reviews that you've requested to be included with the new official plan, also all the correspondence as well. What happens right now is after adoption of the official plan, we have to send out an adoption bylaw notice. Everyone gets notified. If you saw, there was people signing in last night, and we had actually a tick mark to see if they would be notified. We have to do our notification under the Grandver Notification Agreement with First Nations. And then we actually have a meeting with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to get our package ready. And just like as I said yesterday, it's an application like an official plan amendment with a checklist. And we send it to them for their sort of review. And then they press the go button, and they actually have 120 days, but they could press pause themselves thanks to Bill 23, and especially with the new PPS, they're probably going to take into the fall to sort of look at things. They send it out to the agencies. So, and also, as again, this is not the end of the process. It's going to be posted on the environmental registry once they've done their full review internally. So then it gets posted again for public review, ROP, for 30 days on the environmental registry. They get any further comments, and then eventually we'll get an approval from the ministry. So that's actually the process, and I guess if there's any other questions, and otherwise we can move forward with the, I'll turn it over to the Mr. Mayor.
Questions to Jen before we put something on the floor, Councillor Chambers?
Yeah, I'd be willing to make the motion, but before, the question I have, and I know it's going to come up, the mechanisms that are built into the process, I think you've just described them to adjust and compensate for any provincial policy statement changes. That's part of the process, and they recognize that. So if we're outside of provincial policy, there's a mechanism to bring that without doing the whole thing. So I feel comfortable about that. I know it's a lot of concern with 97 and some of this like policies, et cetera, but it's part of the process as we move forward, and it'll be addressed.
Councillor Chambers has offered to make the motion to receive the report. Councillor Oakley, you're going to second it? Any other comments or concerns, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, comments, all right?
Yep.
Positive comments.
Absolutely.
Positive. So, first of all, I want to thank Jen and Michelle, Jessica, Brandon, Lily, recently added, and Pam behind the scenes for their efforts over the last 4 years. It's a job really well done. We have a new OP, but we will have, which for the very most part we can be confident will serve us extremely well. I've got to admire their professionalism, their perseverance, their enthusiasm, and they've needed that over the last 4 years, and their outreach. I think what you did in terms of public and developer community engagement is a model for the future. It really was good. And the plan shows a growing community, which I hope translates into a more affluent and well-serviced and provided for community. And the demand for employment lands and their increasing location along the 403 corridor reflects on the fortunate geographical positioning of the county and the increasing paucity of supply further towards the GTA. I do have concerns. I gave them all tonight, so I haven't got any more concerns, but I do have a few final thoughts. The plan uses the words encourage and financial viability many, many times. Encourage illustrates the challenge of realizing the outcome we want when we don't have all the tools that we would like to have. And we have a provincial government that is progressively reducing the ability of municipalities to act in the interests of their communities. You did take out from the original draft a couple of lines which said, we are encouraged as council to represent the views of our community and those of the county. I'm sorry you took that out. I wish it was back in again. Financial viability is absolutely important. The absence of a long-term financial plan casts a shadow on the doability of the plan that's in front of us. Until such time as I can see the impact of population and employment growth translated into revenues from that growth and the expenditures we have to use to support those aspirations and needs of our growing community, I'm not going to be resting easy. So I'm going to be following up for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Miller?
Just a little bit in line with Councillor Bell following up. And we discussed it earlier tonight. It's tough to predict things about the future. And as hard as they try, we know it's probably not the most, it's going to be accurate, bang on. So I do support, even, this is not the end. I think it's probably more the beginning, because as we go along, we implement it. At the same time, we need to do our growth management watch and just to see how things are progressing. And as Councillor Bell pointed out, the consultant was 50% off on some of those numbers he had originally, which wasn't that long ago. So I think we should, and I'll certainly be pushing for it as we go forward, that we do have those dynamic tools in place to monitor our growth. And I think we have to be nimble and quick and react to them as we see them kind of going off what we thought was our plan. But I'll bring that up to the strat plan.
Thank you. Any other comments, Councillor Chambers?
And I'll just say that I do support the plan. I did not support in its original form, as people know. I think the art will be, and the task of this council will be to marry the official plan with our strategic plan and our financial plan. And if we can do that, the municipality will be in great hands. And I think from what I see, the leadership and the talent on the council as we go forward can do just that. Let's mesh our strategic plan with our official plan and long-term financial plan, and after 4 years, the municipality will be in good stead.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Any other comments? I'd like to have Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will support the plan. I did not, as Councillor Chambers, I did not support it the last time. And I believe in good planning. And I think this document brings it much better than we did in the previous one that we looked at. And I went home last night and I got yelled at because of these big houses all around the community, whatnot, by my better half. And I said, some of that is come from poor planning in the back then by our forefathers. And then you will talk about saving agricultural land, Councillor Bell. Those houses that are scattered out in Eastern Brant ruin more damn farms than anything, because they found a loophole. They got a loophole to get a 25-acre severance. So the farms got divided, a 100-acre farm got divided in 4. Guess what? There are lots all over them now. You got all this land in the back. You wrecked more. So there's good planning and there's bad planning. And I think I hate to be critical of our forefathers, but they made some mistakes. They were looking for assessment. And as Councillor Chambers just says, assessment helps keep the tax rate within reason. And that's why we gotta have industrial land. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I want a recorded vote, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Kyle.
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine.
Yes.
Councillor Oakley.
Yes.
Councillor Howes.
Yes.
Councillor Bell.
Yes, I support.
Councillor Pierce.
Yes, support.
Councillor Chambers.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Coleman.
Yes.
Councillor Garneau.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Now I'm looking for someone to do my bylaws for me. Who's going to read the bylaws? Councillor Pierce?
Still just the two, Mr. Mayor?
Still there's two.
Who will be seconding? Councillor Bell?
Councillor Bell.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell that bylaws 61-23 to 62-23 be read a first time.
All those in favor? Second reading, please, Councillor Pierce.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bell that bylaws 61-23 and 62-23 be read a second time, and all preambles.
Coax.
And clauses be
Clauses
adopted.
and preambles be adopted.
Any questions on the second reading? Seeing none, all those in favor? And the third reading, which is much easier, Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bell that bylaws 61-23 and 62-23 be read a third and final time.
Thank you.
Passed, signed, and executed.
Passed, signed, sealed,
And
delivered.
executed, yeah.
Supposed to have a piece of paper.
Thank you. All those in favor of the third reading? That's great, thank you. It takes us to number 8 on the agenda, which is a motion to adjourn. Councillor Oakley.